906 podcast, The Freeman Files. And tonight, my co-host for tonight are Jimm Kjelgaard and Mr. Marc Hoover. Marc, you're still on mute if you want to hit that real quick. So I had to pick these two gentlemen for tonight to help us out with our special guest host, our special guest that we'll bring up here in just a few minutes, because they both know him pretty well. And so I thought this would be a great time to have both of you come out and join me on this. So thank you both. Appreciate it very much. And are you guys both doing well?
Doing great.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks, Jeff.
I appreciate it, Marc. And I know Marc and I, we just we're out at the Kadoha Treasure Fest that was happening in Arkansas here just a few weeks ago. That was a fantastic event. And thanks to you, Marc, because you were the one that told me that if I really wanted to meet some folks that were into treasure hunting and metal detecting and bottles and everything else, I needed to be there. So thank you, because it was awesome. And I got to meet KG and Ringy for the first time and have dinner with them. Again, thanks to you. Appreciate that.
And you're going to have them on the show, right?
And we're going to have them on the show. It looks like the 19th of December, folks. The 19th of December at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. KG and Ringy. If you don't know who they are, that's sad. It really is sad that, but they are two very, I'll say, famous metal detectorists. And they've been on Nat Geo. What was the name of their show that was on Nat Geo? I've forgotten it.
Yeah, Diggers. They were on Nat Geo for 4 years, traveling around the world as the Diggers. And, they did this thing where they got really excited when they found something. They would roll around on the ground. They would jump around. That's not really their persona, but it adds to the excitement of their show. People don't really act like they are really just genuinely good guys.
They really are. They really, truly are. So we're looking forward to that. I can't wait to have them on. Folks, thank you all for joining us here in the chat tonight. And if you have any questions, we will do our best to bring those up and get those to our guest tonight. This man, I tell you what, I think he's, in some of my research of Mr. Terry Carter, he has been doing treasure hunting pretty seriously since 1981. I hope that's correct. And he was also featured on a Beyond Oak Island episode. For those of you who know that show, most of you I'm sure do. Beyond Oak Island was season 2, episode number 5, the Josephine Mine. And that's where Maddie Blake went out and he spoke with him, and Gypsy Jules went out, and Gypsy, I talked to her today too. She said to say hi to our to Terry. But yeah, so they went out and they looked into the Josephine Mine, and man, it was an exciting episode. So we're going to get some more information about that tonight. So if you haven't already, please, we appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. And if you click on that notification bell, then you get to know right away when we have new content coming out. And if you like the content of our show we do for you here tonight, please give us a thumbs up. It really helps out with the YouTube algorithms and all of that. So we really appreciate it. All right, without further ado, let me bring up our very special guest, Mr. Terry Carter. Sir, how are you?
Terry Carter!
Yeah.
Rock and roll!
You're giving me a big head. Hey, I'm great. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing fantastic. I know, I put in the top of the description for tonight's show, legendary treasure hunter, because honestly, sir, when I first saw your presentation, I first saw the Josephine Mine episode, and then I caught you at Phenomicon a couple of years ago, the second Phenomicon, where you did a presentation. And from that moment on, I said, this man knows what he is talking about. And I started watching your channel. And by the way, I have linked his YouTube channel and his Facebook page down in the description below. So check that out if you haven't already. There is, I don't know, what do you got, 1,000 more? I don't know how many videos. You got a lot of videos in there.
He's got a couple.
He's got 93,000 followers on YouTube.
Oh, see there you go.
So I'm not a legendary treasure hunter. My claim to fame is I know a lot of people. I knew a lot of people before they passed away that were legendary treasure hunters, and that's my claim to fame. Is I just knew a lot of people.
Well, I tell you what, you have collected in all of your videos and everything you have. Oh, somebody said 93,001 now, according to Zane. He just subscribed. So there you go.
Thank you, Zane. I'm really starting to like you.
But yeah, seriously though, I mean, you have such a wide variety of information from all the interviews that you have conducted of all these people. Like you said, some have passed. I realize that now, but it is like a catalog of treasure hunting people over the course of years and years. Was I right? You've been treasure hunting since 1981?
Yep, you're right. Since 1981, and since 1981, I learned from an early age that I couldn't remember these people. I started talking to the old timers back then, and I couldn't remember their stories. I wouldn't remember them, and even if I could, I wouldn't be able to tell it like they could tell them. So I started recording these people clear back then. So
yeah, and you have it's quite a catalog of great information. I just every time I go out and you've got somebody new on, and then I like to go back and dig through the older stuff that's been on there for years, because I mean and that's sometimes it's a hard thing to do when you go to somebody's YouTube channel. You look through, because there's thousands of videos, but man, there's such a wide variety. And giants, oh, I mean, you're
and some of the stuff on his YouTube is mind blowing. So you really got to go look at them, because there's some great stories on there.
yeah.
The way that I would phrase it, Jeff, is that Terry is not necessarily a legendary treasure hunter. Terry Carter is the treasure, because what he provides is a literal treasure trove of all this great stuff that you've just talked about, stuff that deals with from the Josephine Mine, Lost Roads Mine, giants, and all kinds of great stuff. And it's literally, you go check out Terry's YouTube channel, and it's like going down this most awesome rabbit hole that you will ever go down, because that's what happened to me. And before I knew it, I started watching it one time early in the afternoon, and the next thing I knew, it was 2:00 in the morning, and I just watched all these great videos that Terry has. And Roger and I had the pleasure of meeting Terry at the very first Phenomicon, where Terry was a presenter. And to this day, now that I've got 4 Phenomicons under my belt now, Terry's presentations still rank among the absolute best that I've ever attended at Phenomicon.
Wow, thanks, Jim.
And I mean that most sincerely.
And I was terrified, scared right to death, because I am not a public speaker. I'm just a researcher, a treasure hunter, and I was terrified. So thank you.
But you're passionate about what you do,
Yes.
and you're knowledgeable about what you do, and that's what comes through.
Right.
So,
yeah, it does.
So anything that you feel you have that isn't, doesn't make you a great public speaker, that all just goes out the window, because you're so much fun to listen to, because you can see how much excitement and enthusiasm that you have for this wonderful topic of whether it's Aztec gold or out of place artifacts, you name it. I mean, it's just it's so much fun to listen to all the stories that you've collected over the years, and I'm excited to dive into it tonight.
Terry, did I ever tell you that I really appreciate you?
Yes, you have. I kept on telling that to Marc, because he came all the way out to our Moon Lake Gathering 2024 to speak to us. And not only that, he brought a bunch of great people with him. He hooked us up with Fisher metal detectors. And man, I really appreciate you, Marc.
Awesome.
It's become kind of a thing with us now that we always tell each other.
Great.
That's awesome. I tell you what, I appreciate all 3 of you, be honest. Thank you very much for all being here tonight, trying to pull this all together. But Terry, I tell you, let's go back for just a moment and take a look at the Lost Josephine Mine. You were on that episode of Beyond Oak Island. And in that episode, and I'll just kind of give everybody a brief, and then we'll see what new has happened. But you went out there, and you, Maddie Blake and Gypsy met you guys out there, and you had a gentleman by the name of Tom Beardall, who had been down in that mine before, and found a door down there, deep down inside the mine. Everybody went down. You took everybody down into the mine, and you were all down there investigating, and then came to a looked like a cave in or a blockage. Drilled through it, put a camera in there. Did see that it opened up into another space, accessible, big by people could get in there if they get through this blockage. But that was it. And what has happened since then with Josephine Mine?
So just to back up just a little bit, Tom and his brothers in the 70s, they did go down there and see this door.
Mm-hmm.
And the importance of that is supposedly this mine, this area is the Lost Josephine Mine. And there was a Spanish document that surfaced that said that behind a wooden door, there was 200 and some odd cargoes of gold bars and 600 and some odd cargoes of silver bars, plus slabs of virgin silver. Wow. And so just in today's value, you're talking billions of dollars of treasure through this.
That's a lot of tacos.
That's a lot of tacos. So they have been trying to find a wooden door, see a wooden door, and all that. And it's a big, long story, and I don't have time to go through it. But the bottom line is, I found out about Tom that him and his brothers in the 70s went down this. It's a natural cave. It's a natural shaft, and they was exploring it, and they got lost, and their lights was going dim. They'd been down there all day, and they come into this room, and they see this big giant door. I mean, this thing's like 8 foot wide, 8 foot tall. Tom says, man, he's never seen craftsmanship like that, especially down in a cave. He says it reminded him of something like that's in these dungeons in the movies with these in the castles and stuff. He says but they didn't have time to look at it because their flashlights was dying. They were just worried about getting out of there. Mm-hmm. And so they all their flashlights are dimming. So they shut their lights down, and except for one, and they're going to go on one flashlight till it burns out, and then they got the next one, and then they got the next one. Well, Tom, he's freaking out, because if they're lost down there,
that's it.
They're done.
Yeah.
So he Tom shuts off his flashlight. He kneels down and says a prayer, and he says, God, help us out of here, and I'll never come back again. And when he stood up and turned on his light, it just happened to hit the ceiling where there was an arrow carved in the ceiling, pointing the way out. And so they went out, and true to his promise, Tom never, ever went back. And the two other brothers, they never had any desire to go back either. Well, I heard about this years later. Mm-hmm. And, I tried to get Tom to go down there with us, but he would not go because of his promise to God.
Right.
So I'd take video cameras down there, try and video it, but it's not the same as being down there. And so when we went down with the History Channel, that was the best guess that I could get what Tom was trying to explain to me, Yep. And so we went down there and found out, that whole place is it's a limestone cavern. It's honeycombed with tunnels and stuff. So we've taken GPR up there. There's voids all over the place up there, So right. I wanted to know for sure. So I got with Tom's brother, Tim. He happened to see the show on the TV, and he got with Tim and says, man, I'll go down there. I never made that promise to God,
Yeah.
So we got with Tim, and we go down there, and we get to go down the little tight wormhole. And he goes, wait a minute. We didn't go that way. He said, I promise you we didn't go that way.
Oh, wow.
So what we did was completely not even right.
Wow.
He says, we went over here. Well, over here was all caved in. So we started digging some dirt out, and the dirt's falling back down in, and because it's sloughed off from, it's a solid rock in there, solid limestone, but in that particular area, there's a lot of dirt down in there, tons and tons and tons and tons of dirt. Wow. We cleared off enough, and we could see that it looked like maybe there was a little tunnel. And while we're moving rocks, man, we don't have much space at all. So we're got our heads down there, and we're moving rocks out of the way. And we happen to look up, and there's some numbers and letters carved or on the ceiling.
Oh, wow.
Would look like it put in there with a candle or a carbide lantern or something. Wasn't Spanish or anything, but it was some numbers. And so we got Tim down there. We took pictures of it, showed it to Tom. And when they was driving home after we found that, they remembered that as they came out, they was laying on their back, scooting through their wormhole, which was different than the wormhole we went through. And they remember looking up and seeing them there.
So that was the right one then.
So we was in the wrong one with the History Channel. Now we're in the right one. However, trying to excavate that, and all that debris is falling down. So we've got to shore it up somehow. So we just discovered this last summer. We just discovered this, not this summer, but last summer. And a bunch of things hit me, that I couldn't get back up there. I had a lot of different things I had to spend time with and do some things with the family, So I haven't been back up there really to try and do it. I've just got everything squared away at home now where we can get doing some things, and we're ready to do some excavating and get Tim back down there and do some more things. So it's kind of discouraging that we wasn't in the right spot with the History Channel, but I'm glad we got Tim down there so we didn't waste our time.
Exactly. That's great though. Yeah. Oh man, I tell you what, you have to keep us posted on what you find out next on this thing. Because even just to go down there and find that door, I know. And I spoke a little bit with Maddie Blake today. And I wanted to share this with you. Maddie was so, well, let me just read this. I'm going to read it. It's only take a moment, folks, but I wanted to read this because Maddie wanted this to be relayed to Terry. He said, since Beyond, I have been following along, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Glad you were talking to Terry. That is one of the greatest adventures of my life. I really, truly wanted to find that door for Tom and Terry. When we were in post-production thinking about the season of Beyond, right at the top of my list was to go back down there and find that door. He said, if Beyond were to continue, which of course it hasn't, that's one of the most important places to him. Of course, the riverboats and some of the other shows he talks about here. But he said drilling into that wall and waiting for the images to come through that snake camera, or some of the most exciting moments on that hunt. Please send Terry my best. And he wants to he wants to come and go back down there. Now I don't know. He's obviously he's working with Prometheus and all of that. But
Maddie's a great guy, and I got to give it up to Maddie because he told me before he went down that he was claustrophobic, and I thought he's going to be in trouble because going
what
through
a
that
place to
wormhole,
send him. Good heavens,
it's tight going through that wormhole. I mean, it's difficult, and he went down there, man.
Yeah,
flying colors, man. He didn't let on that he was claustrophobic down there. He did great, man, and you got to give it to Maddie. He's an adventurer.
Hey, Terry, relative to the treasure, the gold and the silver, is the assumption that was all Spanish? And if it was Spanish, where did the Spanish get it from?
The gold?
Yeah, the gold and silver that were in that behind the door. According
to the Waybill, there was slabs of virgin silver down there and gold. So they smelted it. What happened was that the Indians was attacking them and driving them off. And when they first started, there was 42, 43 of these Spanish miners, soldiers there. And by the time they was fleeing for their life, because the Indians were attacking them, killing them, there was only 8 of them left. Only 8 of them made it back to Spain. But you can't blame the Indians not one bit, because the Spaniards captured the Indians, enslaved the Indians, made them work till they died, which they had a short lifespan living, working for the Spaniards, and they treated them pretty poorly. Yeah. And for some funny reason, the Indians didn't like that program, so they revolted, killed the Spaniards, drove them out,
Yep, absolutely.
Before they left, they took all the gold and the silver bars and hid them in the tunnels, hid them in, and put them behind this wooden door. Well, this wooden door that Tom and Tim found, it's not the same wooden door where they put this behind. This is another wooden door. Oh. We don't know what this wooden door. It doesn't mention this wooden door in the Waybill. this is something else. And
Oh, my.
and whether this is a back entrance into it, because the way we went, there's no way they could have built this door hauling the wood down the way we went in. There had to be another entrance. This had to be the back entrance into that to lead off to all the mining tunnels. And who knows what could have been there? Maybe nothing. I don't know. But to me, just for a wooden door down there, that's pretty historic. And man, that was a treasure to me, just to find this door.
Absolutely. And that's how Maddie felt about it as well. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. And you're so correct, because Maddie mentioned that too in there about the claustrophobia. And he said, every time he was getting in, and there was a couple what you guys were calling wormholes. I've done some caving myself, some splunking, and I love that stuff. But you get in some pretty tight spots, and it can be freaky when you start to get a little stuck.
Oh.
And you have to just calm down and move yourself through, So for him to do that with having claustrophobia, I don't know how he did it.
I got stuck in a cave one time. I'd heard a treasure story that there was some Spanish gold bars and some kids found some in what they called a chimney in this cave. And I thought I knew where this chimney was, and I got in there, and it was really narrow. You had to go up 20 foot. You had to put your back against one side and your feet against the other side, and you inched your way up. And then there was this little tunnel that went off, but it was kind of shaped like that, and it was real narrow. I thought I could put my hands in front of me, turn sideways, and let my air out and push all the way out and push, and I could get through. I didn't. I got stuck right on my sternum, and I couldn't reach anything this way. I couldn't reach anything with my feet. I was stuck. I couldn't go. I used to go alone all the time. Luckily, that day I had somebody with me, and I says, "You guys got to get up here and get me out." They didn't want to shimmy up there to get me, but they finally did, and they pulled me out. And then when they started pulling me out, my shirt started rolling up on me and wedged me in tighter, man. I had metal buttons on my shirt. By the time they got me in, man, I was all scraped up and scarred up. But I'd have been there a long time if they hadn't. So I know what it's like to be stuck in a cave. It's not fun. I thought I was fine, but when I couldn't move and I started breathing, I started panicking, and I started breathing heavier, and man, my chest got thicker. And
that's what happened.
Wow.
Never go splunking alone. Never. And always tell your, somebody, hey, we're going to be up here, and we expect to be back home at such and such. And call out the search party if we're not back. Yeah. I've learned some lessons about that myself. Wow. That had to be scary. One thing I did want to ask you before we leave the Josephine Mine, and this is something that I've heard from other people. Dan referenced it, Dan Dillman, when we had him on, the curse. Do you believe in the curse that they talk about, that they put over their gold to protect it, or their treasure?
I can curse really good.
Not that kind of curse.
I'm effective at it. I'm a professional. I'm a New Yorker.
Oh, yeah, right.
So, I didn't know if I believed in curses. I didn't know, I didn't know that I believed in ghosts. I didn't know that I believed in any of that, because I'd never dealt with anything. And I thought, well, I've never been cursed, so I must not have ever been close enough to the treasure to be cursed, But I've ran into some people that have found like Native American artifacts, and they grave rob some tombs, which is a no-no. You don't do that. Some Native American, and they believed that they were cursed bad enough that they took the stuff back. Several people I've talked to, but I didn't believe in that. I didn't know that I really believed in that until one day. And I didn't learn for 4 months later. I talked to a person, looked like a normal person, talked to him for a half hour. I learned 4 months later that guy I talked to had been dead for 10 years. And that freaked me out. That freaked me out. And I thought, my total thought process changed. And I thought, wow, if that can happen, how many times have I talked to somebody before that's been dead and I didn't know it? I would have never known. It was a fluke that I found out this guy'd been dead. Wow. It was a fluke. And that changed my whole thought process. I thought, I don't know what to believe anymore. After that, I don't know what to believe.
Wow.
Well, Jeff, talking about curses, and I hadn't really thought about it very much, but and I spoke on this at the gathering. Terry's actually just loaded it up, I think, on his.
I was watching it the other day. Yep.
On YouTube. And the thing is, I did that story about the treasure that was found on the treasure coast of Florida.
Right.
And there were several people, and I don't want to name names, but there were several people that are very close to that treasure that said they now believe that it's cursed because of some of the things that happened.
Wow.
Was that the Atocha?
No, it was the 1715 fleet, 12 galleons that sank off in 1715.
Okay.
But if you think about that treasure, all of the natives that died when they were doing the mining and the enslavement, like they did out west where Terry's talking about, they did the same thing in South America. The Spanish enslaved the Indians down there, and a lot of them died in those mines. And then you've got 12 galleons where they're all sinking, in a hurricane. And that hurricane, it could have been one day either way.
Yep.
And that was 3 years worth of treasure that was coming back to Spain. And they could have left the day before, the day after. They all get caught. They all sink. 1,500 men die in when all those galleons sank.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I really started thinking, there's something to this curse or this curse on these treasures when some of these things start happening, and I don't want to go into the details of what's happened recently.
Right. Yeah.
But it really makes you think about it.
It does. Wow. And you make sense with that, all the people that were enslaved and that storm coming up, because then the 1715 fleet, was there 3 ships that still have yet to be found? So we don't know what happened to them.
Yeah. Like 3 or 4. Well, no, they're there. There was 11 out of 12 of them sank.
Okay. All
now,
right.
here's what's interesting about that. I don't want to take Terry's time, but what's interesting about that is there was 11 Spanish galleons carrying treasure. There was one ship, and I can't remember. I think it was a French ship that was going to hook up with them in Cuba and go back with them back to Europe. When that hurricane blew up, those galleons all came across. They all went up the coast of Florida. They're trying to get in close to get away from the storm.
Right.
That other French ship took off and went west, and they were the only ones that survived.
Wow.
They didn't have any treasure on their ship.
They didn't have any treasure. Yeah. Wow. Well, that's that gets a little adds a little credence to the whole thing, doesn't it? Makes you really think.
Makes you wonder.
It does make you wonder. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And it was really a sad thing that happened. You think about it now, and this goes back to Terry to ask you about this. In talking with Dan Dillman, when they were, there's 2 sides to the story, I guess, kind of in my mind, and maybe I'm incorrect and you can help me with this. But when all this was happening down in the Aztecs, with the Aztecs down in South America or Mexico, and they came up, were they running from there to bring their treasure and hide it from the Spaniards? Was that how this was happening and they were coming up into North America, or is that story completely turned around a little bit? What's your opinion on it?
So originally the Spaniard or the Aztecs came from the north. Nobody knows where that's at. They just called it the ancient homeland of the Aztecs, Aztlan. And nobody really knows where that at. Some people think it's still in Mexico. Some people think it's Texas, Utah, New Mexico. Nobody really knows, because the Spaniards destroyed all their records to convert them to Christianity. To convert the younger ones, they had to destroy all their records. Dan says they didn't destroy all the records. They ended up in the archives for the Catholic Church in the Vatican. In the Vatican. That sounds like a great theory to me. That makes sense to me. That's probably true. But they took all their records away, So we don't know where Aztlan is, But what happened was when Cortez came in and conquered the Aztecs, took all their treasures back to their native homeland, which I believe, and a lot of people believe, are in Utah. And I think that's how the Spaniards ended up in Utah in the Uinta Mountains, as they was following the trail, trying to find where all this Aztec treasure ended up.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of what Dan was saying too, and that's the first time I had heard that. And again, this is one of the subjects. The Aztec gold is one of the subjects that really, really intrigues me, and scares me a little bit. I'd love to go look for it myself, but then I'm kind of afraid of finding it.
So that Aztec treasure, that there's, and Dan probably talked about it a little bit. There in Kanab, they thought that it was in Kanab, and they think it could be on a place near Kanab, that's called Three Lakes with the Child's family, and the curses, the things that went on, whether it was just a freak it happened or it was tied to a curse, people lost their lives, people got deathly sick, people died. It's the things that happened while they was trying to get to this, where they thought this Aztec treasure was, is you got to go, is that coincidence or is that a curse?
Yeah. I don't believe in coincidences, so there you go.
Well, there's Terry, correct me if I'm wrong. The Uinta Mountains are like a legend unto themselves, and there's so much history and so much mythology that is associated with the Uinta Mountains in particular in the state of Utah. And there's all kinds of stories of people that are searching for whether it's the Aztec gold or the Mormon gold or some of the old the legends of like the Nephite gold and things like that, where people have lost their lives up in the Uinta Mountains, either through natural accidents where they had something similar to like what you experienced in the cave, where they got stuck in a cave and they asphyxiated from getting crushed from the stones, or there's even tales of people that have been murdered, that have been killed while searching for the gold. So there's kind of playing back into that whole thing about the curse. You can look at that as being a bit of a curse tied into the gold, but it's definitely something that makes people probably tends to bring out the worst in people as far as greed and what people are willing to do to get their hands on those riches, right? And that's why I've always said, if you're going to go looking for that, do it with the right frame of mind. Don't necessarily do it for the purpose of making yourself ridiculously wealthy, because the way the laws and everything are written right now, you try taking any artifacts and the federal government finds out about it. Particularly like here in Utah, if you do it and it's anywhere near tribal land, you're going to prison. And there's it's just things like this are part of a shared history that we all would have. And I would hope anybody that ever comes upon treasure like this, that they would see the value in it and want to preserve it, document it and preserve it as best as they can. And I know that's one of the things that Terry always pushes for. One of the many reasons why Terry is just the awesome guy that he is.
Yeah, I agree. That very well said. Thank you. Terry, you saw that question that popped up there just a minute.
I did from Tech.
Yeah,
from Tech. Do I hunt KGC treasure?
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of KCG treasure hunting. I stumbled into a thing which completely changed my way of treasure hunting. I originally started out hunting for Spanish treasures, the lost gold in the Uinta Mountains. And but I stumbled onto some hieroglyphs, I'm going to call them. They're not Indian. These things are like, they're not Egyptian hieroglyphs, but they're like that kind of, I stumbled on high in the cliffs of the mountains east of Provo. And one of the theories is that these are tied to KGC treasure, so I did a lot of research on KGC treasure. That KGC treasure is scattered all across the country, and I'm sure these guys probably already know all about it, that the South was going to rise again, and they needed the funds to do that. So they hid gold, silver, weapons, anything that they could use all across the country to help unite the cause for the South to rise again. But then the Spanish-American War happened. It kind of united the United States, and that kind of fizzled, and all that treasure still kind of out there, all over, more probably in prevalent, in the East and the West than there is here in the West. But there's stories of KGC stuffs here in the West. And Holly Remke's, who lives out here in Utah. She's a big KGC treasure hunter, and she's finding all kinds of stuff. So I do a little bit, but not a lot, like Holly does.
Yeah. Yeah. Holly Remke says we've had her and Warren Gettler on right after they were on their Beyond Oak Island episode. And Holly and I have stayed in touch with each other, and I've asked her. I said I'd love to have you come back on and share some updated information with us, and she agreed. She wants to do it after the first of the year, so we're good with that. But yeah,
Holly's not just a researcher, Holly is an actual foots on the ground. She's an explorer. She's an adventurer.
Yep. Yeah. If you follow her Facebook page, which I do, you'll see her with pictures of, and she's always looking for markers, rocks that have been either marked or carved in some way to represent something, signs, they're signposts. And she's always looking for that kind of stuff. And it's what a remarkable woman. She really is. Anyway, I could go all day about that, but
so back to what Jimm was saying, though, the treasure, the real treasure is the people you get to meet, the stories you get to hear, the artifacts you get to see every now and again, and the places you get to go that most people will never ever get to go see and hear. That's the real treasure, and anything other than that is icing on the cake, and I really like icing on my cake. But I have met several people. You think, you hear of gold fever, and you think, man, could that really be real? I have met some people that gold fever is real, and I've seen them go ballistic. I was scared for my life a couple times, for what happened. And then also back to what else did you say, Jimm? I was gonna say something I forgot.
I usually say a whole bunch of nothing most of the time.
That's what I do, man. My brain works faster than my mouth, and I think I've said things when I haven't, and I go back and listen to it. I think that didn't even make no sense.
No, yeah, just know the respect that he was talking about, the respect too, to have respect for, when you find that sort of stuff. And go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. You got to keep this as a hobby, because there is a lot of people that let it consume them. They got the gold fever. They let it consume them. They threw away their family. They threw away their jobs. They threw away their life. They threw away everything and let this consume them. You got to keep it as a hobby. You got to, your family, your faith, your job, and all that. That's more important than this. This is just a great hobby, and if you happen to find something extra, man, that's just great icing on the cake.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well said. Well said.
You were mentioning about people you've met, and then we were talking about the down there by Kanab, and there was of actually one of your videos that's on. And I was watching it earlier, and this is where you had Lon Childs in sharing some of the stories. And he talked, and one of the things that got me, and I was actually doing some stuff, and I had it playing, and I was listening, and then he talked about the guy, and I don't remember his name, but he talked about a gentleman who had found something, and then this guy mysteriously died just a little while later, and then his wife died like a week after that. And, and he was talking about the curse, of course, and I'm thinking, why? That's just kind of strange, but they seem to believe in it, and I mean, they're the ones right down in that area, right?
Yeah. Yep.
This was called, and if anybody wants to listen to it, and I love the way you do your interviews. We hear you talking in the background, but you're never in front of the camera. You're always behind the camera.
It's not about me. It's about these other people,
Yeah, I get that. I really do. But that's the way these are all filmed, and it's really good. So you want to check that out. It's called "Found the Aztec Treasure in," and the Aztec Curse is Real. So yeah, check that one out, because that's why I had to ask you that question. I was curious what you thought about it. Yeah, found the Aztec treasure, and then all the broke loose. So yeah,
and sometimes I mean, just you're mentioning the curse just made something pop up in my mind. No, not a 4-letter word. Don't worry. But if you think back when what was his name? His last name was Carter, if I'm not mistaken. The guy that discovered Tutankhamun's tomb.
Howard Carter.
Howard Carter. So there was this legend of the curse of the mummy's tomb, where all the people that went in and excavated, the workers, that they started to come down with this mysterious illness and die all of a sudden. So of course that started these rumors of there being a curse of the mummy's tomb. Well, science, it turns out, determined that most likely what that was the result of was mold that had accumulated inside of the tomb. And Terry, I think you actually spoke to this in your in the episode that you did of Beyond Oak Island, where anytime you've got a cave or someplace that has been sealed up underground for a long time, you're inherently going to get a natural buildup of toxic gases sometimes as well, right? Is it hydrogen sulfide?
Yeah,
I think
that's
is one of them.
There's all
H2S.
different kinds of things that you could have. Yeah.
So it's easy to understand how some of these legends get started for things that are very well rooted in science, that people can inhale these particles that contain mold and spores, and be subject to these gases that just accumulate over the years wherever there's, particularly if there's like a high concentration of lead or different things like that in the caves. And so yeah, that's kind of adds another layer of the
And
curse
there's
and
more to
legends.
it than that. The Spaniards, they would take and sprinkle arsenic on the gold
Right.
bars they left,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so you touch that and get that in your skin, and slowly, you're done for. So
Yeah.
so there's all kinds of things that happen that you could attribute to a curse. Like I say, I didn't believe in curses until I talked to that ghost for a half hour, and I didn't know he was a ghost, for 4 months.
That's
I'm-
amazing.
I'm a Raiders fan, so my life is cursed. So I know all about curses, being a Raiders and a Yankees fan for that matter. So
So, so Terry, talking about treasure, have you ever, and I think I know the answer, but have you ever like found treasure where you like holding the gold bar or the silver bar?
I haven't personally found what I'm looking for, but I've got to hold gold and silver bars. But I personally haven't found them yet.
Wow.
Now, I've heard, and you can confirm or deny this, but I've heard that probably 1 out of 10 treasures that are found are actually revealed. So, like the other 9, you never know that they found it. Is that?
You very rarely, because of the antiquities laws, because of the government,
Wow.
most treasure hunters you'll never hear unless you happen to personally know them. You'll never hear the story about this stuff being found. It's and I can tell this now because the guy's passed away and gone. But I know a guy that's when I first started hunting, I got to be good friends with him, and he shared with me and let me hold some gold bars. He found 400 gold bars. The smallest one was 12 pounds.
wow.
They weren't pure gold bars. One of them, I think it was like 50. It had 58% gold and had a lot of copper, iron, silver, other stuffs in it. It was 58% gold. You will never, ever, ever hear about that. And the person that you do hear about that, you hear about them going to jail for taking antiquities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so because of that, man, our laws are crazy. I can't even go into the forest with my metal detector. I can't find a penny. I can't pick up legally a penny that was dropped in the forest that's older than 50 years old. I legally can't do that, or I could go to jail.
Wow.
How stupid is that?
Yeah.
I love the way Europe does it. You get a finder's fee, you get a split it, you get a and that way history is not lost.
Well, you got to be real. You got to be real specific. That's the way England does it. Now, if you go into France, it's a whole different story. They will throw you under the jail in France.
So here's the deal: how much history has been lost because this stuff is hidden? They find it, they don't tell a soul. You'll never know the true history of what happened because it's hidden, covered underneath the radar, black marketed artifacts, everything. A lot of history is being hidden because of our laws.
Right.
You're exactly right. And that's a shame, honestly. It really truly is.
It's a travesty.
It is. It really is. And because, you're right. Some people aren't going to bring it up. Me personally, I'd like to see it. Would I love to have a coin, a gold coin, Aztec coin, or some kind of, treasure found from the 1715 fleet, something hanging around my neck. That would be cool. Just to say that I found it. Right. But honestly,
Florida man got it right. They let you, on the beach. You can find that old stuff, and it's legal to take.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and there again, you got to be real specific because it's got to be between the high water mark and the low water mark. Anything in the water belongs to the state or only on the beach, and that's why that treasure that my friend found on the beach, he kept all of it. And
That's an
that was
amazing
thanks
treasure.
to Mel Fisher, because Mel Fisher took this all the way. The state took all of his treasure.
Yep.
And he took it all the way to Supreme Court and won.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court gave it all back to him.
Yep. And it's still going. That
It's
story
still
is
going.
still happening. Yeah, the Atocha, it's still happening out there. And I had the opportunity to meet Melvin Apt and had him on the show before.
He's a great
too.
guy.
He
Yeah.
really is. Yeah.
And thank you, Mark, for introducing me to Melvin and Taffy.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Taffy is a smart girl. She is one smart girl, knowing the laws and
Yeah.
what she's doing to get all the resources, everything that's been found, to get cataloged and categorized and all that, so that we know the history of that, the 1715 fleet and all that stuff. Man, it's just incredible. She's
Yeah.
one
You know,
smart
now,
girl.
yeah, she's now passing it down to her daughter, Mel Fisher's granddaughter, Nicole, who runs the museum over in Sebastian. So it's being passed down.
Cool.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah,
Yeah. Melvin,
the Fisher family, man, they're all for preserving history.
they are. That's really, and it's gone down the generations. You know,
Cool.
like when I got the opportunity to meet Melvin, he came on the podcast, and when I was down in Florida, we went down to Sebastian and actually met him, and he gave me a tour of everything inside, but he took me in the back, and he said, "All right, come on, let's go in the back." And we were looking at some of the broken off a sword hilt and everything that he was here. Check this out. And he was just taking them out of the water, and he's handing them to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm holding this stuff. This is so cool. What a great guy. He really truly is. Yeah. That's the blessing of this podcast and Mark for helping me out.
That's part of the treasure. That is
It
the
is.
treasure of meeting these guys, hearing their stories,
Yep.
because there are some fantastic, great stories out there.
Really
And when they pass away, unless somebody preserves their story, it's gone. Their story, their history, it's gone, because you or I could never tell their story like they tell.
No, absolutely, absolutely, and that's what I love what you do, and that's where I was headed next. And I encourage Mark and Jimm to please jump in anytime with a question. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, and I know this may be a tough question for you, but of all the stories you've heard, what is one of your favorites, and really intrigues you the most that you've heard? I know that might be difficult to come up with just one, but what do you think? Is there any that really come to mind that just like intrigue you to no end?
Yep, it's Brewer's Cave, the giants in stone sarcophaguses, and the records in ancient boxes. Yeah, in stone boxes.
Can you share?
Yeah.
Okay, please tell us about that.
This is one of my absolute favorites as well.
Yeah.
So I in the course of I'll make this short because this is a long story.
That's okay.
But in the course of when I found what I call the mystery glyphs, these hieroglyphs, neatly, painstakingly carved on cliff walls in remote locations. Doing the research on these, I accidentally got into some files and some things that I wasn't meant for me to see. And one of the things in here was Brewer's Cave in these files. And when I seen what was there, I spent a lot of money photocopying and the story intrigued me. This is before the internet. And it talked about these giants in stone sarcophaguses and these ancient records. I didn't know about giants back then, other than I'd heard about David and Goliath in the Bible. But other than that, I didn't really know about giants. I didn't know there was other giants being around. I had no clue. But what intrigued me was these ancient records. That intrigued me. And so I started following it and tracking down, and lo and behold, man, I learned that there was things as ancient, these giants being found, And so the short of the story was this man in the 50s, John Brewer, found this cavern looking for arrowheads. And he found these while he was digging for arrowheads. He's digging down and finds these steps, and he breaks into it. He wonders why there's steps carved in the, going down in this cave. And he breaks into this tomb, and he's excavating this tomb, and he finds, these stone sarcophaguses, with two of them with giant mud. He unlit them. He had to take a handyman jack and some crowbars and slide the lid off, and looked, and here's this man and this woman. The man was like, the woman was 7'8", and the man was 9'7", something like that.
Right.
And the man had red hair,
Red
wearing
hair.
a gold crown, gold breastplates, a big, huge sword. The woman wearing a gold crown, breastplates, you know. And I thought, man, well, this is kind of a bogus story. I don't know that I believe in this, you know. But I had the file of everybody that was involved with this, that was trying to get this information, trying to find out if this was real or not. So I wanted to know more about this story. So I started contacting everybody that was left alive, and contacted them and getting their interviews out of them and whatnot. And I tracked down one of these stone boxes was brought out, and it was wrapped in juniper bark, and it had 6 copper plates in it with writings on it. It was in a stone box. And so when I found that, I helped form an organization called the Ancient Historical Research Foundation. And we took this bark and we had it carbon dated. And when they first carbon dated it, it tested, they thought this thing was going to be modern. They thought it was going to come back, plus or minus 200 years, basically baseline. You know, they thought it was a modern fraud. When they did the tests on it, it come out at 2500 BC, and they could not believe that. Wow. So they ran the test 10 times, and 10 times it came out to be 2500 BC, and they was flabbergasted. So they got checking their machine and everything, and they screwed up. They screwed up. They ran out of the solution that their machine was calibrated, and they got a different kind of solution, and they never recalibrated to that solution. When they recalibrated, it threw our test back from 2500 BC back to between 55. I always say 50 and 350 BC, but it was 5 and 350 BC, which is still ancient. Still ancient. Oh. When I got that test back, I thought, there's got to be some truth to this. You know, it's still John Brewer could have maybe found a Indian burial with a bark mat or something in it and took that and made this. So that's still possible, but it gave it more credence that this could be real.
Yep.
That quickly became my high priority to find this tomb. I want to know if these giants are real. Well, I did a lot of research and I think I found the location, and there's a big story there, but it's locked up. I can't do anything because of the government laws, the government rules, the government regulations. You can't do anything. I tried sneaking and doing some things, and it's just so deep, so thing. And I'm finding that evidences that this is the right place. So I tried to get some permission that we could do an archaeological dig, and where it's at, man, they said I had to get permission from the Paiutes and from the Utes. And so I've had an archaeologist writing letters to do that, and nobody's, because of human remains and their beliefs and all that, that nobody's willing to give me the permission. So it's locked up. I can't do anything to verify it, and until it's verified, it's just a great story,
Yeah.
But I think there's enough evidence there to go after and check this story. Who are these giants? Who are these? What were these ancient records? That's an interesting thing to me. And that's the treasure right there. It's not my intentions to loot it or anything. I want it studied. I want it videoed, and I want to release it to everybody.
Right.
That's an important story.
If I'm not mistaken, Terry. Is there also not accounts of how the Latter-day Saint Church actually sent some of their officials down there to look at some of the artifacts and stuff that was there before Brewer sealed it off again? Go ahead.
So that's how I got. That's how I got my records. I got into some of the LDS Church's records that I shouldn't have got into, and that's how I found it. Yes, they sent people down there. That's how I learned about it, because that's true.
And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, it was actually one of the LDS general authorities. So one of the leaders of the LDS Church went down there, and forgive me if I get the story wrong. I think it was BYU actually sent a team there, and BYU's archaeology team was like, "No, this isn't. This is probably just a fabrication." But then one of the heads of the church came down and said, no, this is really something. This is legitimate. This is real, and we
Well,
should protect and preserve it.
so the church wanted, I got letters, the church wanted to get control of this because they thought it had to do with their religion.
Right.
Anything. So here's what you got to understand. You got to understand, a lot of people say them damn Mormons, it's all fabricated. Well, here's what you got to understand. They sent out an army of missionaries all around the world. And anytime them missionaries seen anything interesting that they thought could be tied to the Book of Mormon, whether it was or not, they said they thought it was, and so it would go back to their mission president, and it'd make its way back to church headquarters. And if the church headquarters thought it was interesting enough, they sent people out there to investigate it, whether it had anything to do with it or not. If it had anything to do with intercontinental travel before Columbus, if it had any, they was all over this, and they kept and they've got. There's no doubt that just like the Vatican has all their records, there's no doubt that.
Oh yeah.
The Mormon Church has all kinds of things that are artifacts that have been found that
Yes.
don't fit the narrative. That's out of place artifacts,
Right.
but they think it's could be tied or is tied to their religion, so they're holding on to it. And it doesn't really get released to the public because
Right.
then all these people say, "Oh man, you just made that up. It's fraud, and you're just trying to promote your church." So they just keep on to it and hold on to it. They're a wealth of information for out of place archaeology stuff. They think it's tied to their church, whether it is or not, who knows? But they gathered this stuff for hundreds of years. They've been gathering this
They
stuff.
probably have more gold than Fort Knox. Who knows?
Probably. Wow. Well, I tell you what, that's an interesting story. And, and people, and I've talked about that. I brought that up a few times on my show, talking about giants, and people are like, Jeff, giants don't exist. And there's no way, no possible way. I said, look, I'm a Christian. You see the cross right here. And it's in the Bible. David and Goliath, you brought it up yourself. It's in the Bible. So giants did exist at some point, what we would consider a giant. And you look back at the people and this is the part where they say, oh, it's a hoax. But people have found bones in the past. They've turned those bones in, and all of a sudden they're gone. Nobody knows anything about it. Oh, there's no bones. What are you talking about? Where are all those bones? There have been bones found, no doubt about it, and they're gone. They're simply
what's
gone.
interesting is, and you talk about the Bible, there's an account in the Bible talking about a giant with 6 fingers and 6 toes.
Uh-huh.
And when you hear about some of these accounts, some of the similarities are they describe 6 fingers and 6 toes. They have 2 rows of teeth. A lot of them have been known to have red hair. So there's some similarities about some of these stories with the giants.
Absolutely. The Nephilim. There's is it Jimm or Terry? Is it McConkey Ranch? There's a petroglyph on the wall?
McConkey Ranch.
McConkey Ranch. Yeah, I thought it was.
It depicts 6-toed and 6-fingered beings. Yeah. Giants.
Giants. Bigger than everyone else.
If you got to see them, Jeff, man, I don't know if you made it to the Three Kings, but it's all spectacular. In my most humble but accurate opinion, the petroglyphs at McConkey's Ranch are the most spectacular in all of the United States. I mean, these things are carved lifelike, and they're not just carved. Man, these guys got jewelry. They got breastplates. And not only that, they were carved and painted.
Yes.
So I can just imagine what these things looked like when they was fresh.
Yeah.
And them things, because you can still see the paint on them today.
Yep.
Them things had to be spectacular.
Yeah, they did. And the Three Kings, and we, Jimm and I were very fortunate to have a guide that took us on our particular one out there, James Keenan. He's the one that took
great
us out.
guy.
He is a fan. He's been on the show too, and he's coming back on. As a matter of fact, he's coming on in November, or I'm sorry, in December. We're going to have James on again. But yeah, he took us on that presentation. And when you mentioned the giants in the sarcophaguses with the crown and the breastplates, it made me think of the Three Kings. It made me think about those those petroglyphs. And so that, I tell you, oh man, I'm going to hope with everything I can that you are able to continue this research and get into this and open it to the public, and hopefully you don't disappear or anything like that. I'm gonna
Well,
Hey, Terry,
there's
what year was that discovered on that ranch or wherever that was at the cave? When did they discover that? You know?
With the giants,
Yeah, yeah.
that was in the 50s that was discovered.
wow.
So 1950s. Okay.
now just to promote Terry's website or YouTube channel a little bit here. He's got a great video out there that an interview he did with a gentleman by the name of Bob Shrewsbury, and Bob Shrewsbury was one of these folks, one of these dare I call them old timers that was just again a treasure trove himself of these great stories of treasure hunting. But Bob told a great story about giants. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Terry, in the area where he grew up. And you posted a video of it, and it's one of my favorite videos that you've ever posted on your channel with Bob Shrewsbury.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I recommend it.
Robert Shrewsbury, when he was a kid, back in the 40s, the 50s, that's what people did, was they went and digging Indian graves and they looted them. That's what they did. I mean, that was a pastime. That's what people did, and that's what his family did. His brothers did, that they would come from a poor family and they'd loot these, they'd find these Indian burials, loot them, and then sell the artifacts. Well, in the doing that, they uncovered some giants down there in the Kanab area. They found some giants,
Wow.
So
Yeah, I tell you, that's something that has to be brought out, because I think it would also answer a lot of the questions we have about how could, humans that are this big be able to lift those or build that or whatever. It would take a much bigger machine or something to be able to do that. And now if you can get that story out and the truth be told about it, I think there would be some questions that are answered.
Well, the problem you got is the NAGPRA laws, the Native American Repatriation Act, and I can agree with that.
Yeah.
We have dug up so many of their graves. We've dug up so many of their artifacts, and there's no room more for them. Just like Taffy Fisher says, you fill up a museum with that stuff, and then new stuff comes. You have no place for it. So what do? They chuck it. You can only study so much of the Native Americans, and that's already been done. I agree with them. We shouldn't be looting their graves. We shouldn't be, I agree with that 100%. Yep. But when it comes to something like a giant, that's different, man. We need to know who this is, because they haven't been studied yet. That I know of. It probably has. It's just not getting passed down to us.
Exactly. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And that's why it needs to come out for sure. Wow. I'm looking at my notes here about things that I wanted to talk to you about. We did cover the curse and stuff like that, but one of the other things that intrigues me, and I think you have a video on it, talking about the Egyptians in the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that too.
All right, I stole your question, Mark. Sorry about that. But what can you tell us about that? Egyptians in the Grand Canyon.
I haven't really studied the Egyptians in the Grand Canyon a lot, just a little bit, just enough to know that they say that Powell, can't think of his first name right now. Anyways, Major Powell.
Yeah, John Wesley Powell.
Yeah,
right?
John Wesley Powell. That he found these catacombs in the Grand Canyon, and then the Smithsonian set back another group with G.E. Kincaid and to explore it more, and they took truckloads and truckloads and hundreds of truckloads of stuffs out of this Grand Canyon that were Egyptian-like, whether they was Oriental or Egyptian-like. But they says, man, these catacombs could have fit like 50,000 people in there. The Smithsonian denies that all this ever happened, but there's been some Egyptian artifacts found. There was when I was tracking down these mystery glyphs, trying to find out more about these things, that when I found them, that's one of the routes that took me down a lot of avenues. It took me, the Aztecs, the Egyptians, the KGC. It took me down a lot of avenues. Well, one of them was there was some Egyptian artifacts starting to be found near some of these mystery glyph sites. And one was in 1918. This young girl found this rock that was carved. It had been shaped to the size and the shape of a chicken egg, and it had some markings on it. They just thought it was Indian markings. Well, this young girl kept it all her life until she became older, and one day her great granddaughter was there visiting her, and she was going through her stuffs and found this egg that she found as she was a girl, and she gave it to the great granddaughter. This girl that found the egg, she, when she was a grandmother, she got cancer and was terminal, and she was dying, and she gave it to the great granddaughter. The great granddaughter kept it all her life because it was something special that was given to her by her great grandmother just before she died. Mm-hmm. Well, in the 70s, when King Tut's tomb was making its round through the United States, they had, I don't know if you guys got to go to it, I did. They had the exhibit of King Tut's tomb, and it was pretty cool to see that. Well, at the same time, the Smithsonian had a magazine, and they put out the exhibit on their magazine and talking about it and that. Well, this lady, now she's an older lady, she's in her dentist in there, sitting in the dentist's office, and she's reading this on King Tut's tomb, and she gets noticing that there's some markings on King Tut's sarcophagus. That's the exact markings that are on this egg, this chicken egg rock that her grandmother had given her. So she took it to the University of Berkeley, and they authenticated that it was a piece of alabaster from Egypt, and it had King Tut's high priest signature on one side and the cartouche of his name on the other. Now, this egg was found in 1918, but they didn't even break in. They didn't even really know who King Tut was until 1922. And then there was another a rock that was carved into the shape of a scarab beetle, and it had Egyptian markings all over it. And it was found in 1953 in Colorado by a 5-year-old kid. Yeah. And it was found on a knoll near where he lived, and there was a depression in that knoll. And he kept it all his life. Well, he contacted me. I thought, because it was found kind of near another one of these mystery glyph sites. So when he contacted me, I thought he was wanting to show me a new mystery glyph site that I didn't know about. But when I got with him, he showed me this Egyptian scarab that he found. So I was curious about it. So I contacted some Egyptian antiquities dealers, and I showed it to them, not telling them it came from the United States. And the very first person says, "Man, that's crudely made, man. That's an obvious fake." And then everybody else jumped on and says, "You're wrong, man. We've seen something like this, man. This wasn't done by a high priest, so this wasn't carved by an intelligent person. This is more of a magician's amulet or something like. This thing looks real." And they said it had King Tutmosis III's name on this rock. I have a friend. that we was talking about the mystery glyphs, and he says, "I found some strange markings down by Lake Powell." Lake Powell, excuse me, Lake Powell was formed by I get excited.
No, please. You got me excited. If you need to get a drink.
Lake Powell goes through the Grand Canyon, is formed by the Colorado River. They dammed up the Colorado River, and it backs up to the Grand Canyon, where they're saying these Egyptian things that the Smithsonian took out. Right. Well, this friend of mine found these hieroglyphs looking. He didn't know what they was, but him and his family, they pulled, the lake was way high. They pulled their houseboat in as far as they could back into one of these little canyons, camped for the night, and then in the morning got up and found them, took the picture near him. So he found this picture and showed it to me. When I looked at it, man, these clearly looked like Egyptian to me, And so I mounted an expedition to try and find these, but the lake had receded so far that, it receded 100 feet. Well, 100 feet this way, when you're talking on a shoreline like this, you're talking miles. Yeah. That you're trying. So I tried to find them. I couldn't. But in the meantime of researching that, I found another lady who'd found another set 30 miles away from the ones that we're looking for. Wow. And these things look like Egyptian. And I'm thinking this is along the Colorado, just like the Grand Canyon is. Is this a part of these Egyptian grouped in the Grand Canyon, and they've migrated down farther and left these markings? I don't know. Still researching that. But there's been a lot of Egyptian artifacts found that makes you think, some of them, that they're in the late 1800s. They had an Egyptian they had an Egyptian rivalry thing going. People was crazed by the Egyptian stuff, so they started making these Egyptian artifacts, and some of them stuffs got lost and found, thinking that they were real, but they really weren't. But some of this stuff, you can't explain.
That's crazy.
Well,
And why would they be blocking this? Why would they not be, letting
Well, the answer is presumably rather easy, Jeff. It's because if you have irrefutable archaeological proof of Egyptian, let's say Egyptian or Phoenician or Chinese, any of the ancient civilizations, okay, we're talking pre-Columbus is what I'm referring to here, that were all ocean-faring cultures. The Phoenicians, take all the ancient civilizations that we know traveled the oceans, right? And the Egyptians were among them. If you were to show evidence that those ancient civilizations made it to the New World before Columbus, there's already all kinds of evidence that shows that the Vikings got to North America before Columbus did, but yet academia refuses to acknowledge it because it upsets the apple cart. It goes against what they have been teaching in schools for how many hundreds of years, that, Christopher Columbus is the one that discovered America. Well, quite obviously,
we
no,
know
he was
that's not true.
Right. So whether it was the Vikings or whatever civilization, so think about it. Is it really, truly that much of a stretch to believe that any of these ocean-faring cultures from the old world would, whether on purpose or by accident, end up on any one of the coasts of North, Central, or South America? And my answer to that is, well, it's very much within the realm of possibility, and we have all kinds of evidence that, at the very least, is anecdotal evidence that indicates that there were other cultures that were here in North America, at least, that were here at the same time, if not before, the Native Americans. And so, and as Terry was talking, I mean, again, going back to my state of Utah, there is all kinds of Egyptian artifacts, if you want to call it, things that would seem to indicate some kind of Egyptian influenced culture that have been found in the Uintas and in southern Utah. And of course, then you also want to take into consideration the Grand Canyon. There are certain areas of the Grand Canyon that are absolutely off limits. Not only are they off limits, but if you go straight into these areas, you're going to be confronted with helicopters and with agents that presumably, I don't know if they're National Park Service or if there's some other kind of, federal shadow agency, but they've got guns, they're armed, and they will turn you back and say, you are not supposed to be in this area. And I know that because I've talked to people that have strayed into these areas, oftentimes unbeknownst to them that this is an area that they're not supposed to be in. So again, it all plays into these theories and these legends and the myths. And particularly where the Egyptian stuff is concerned, I believe it. I 100% believe that they did discover Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon. And I believe that they found them here in the United States. And, I won't go into detail, but Terry knows that the story that Roger and I eventually related to Terry pertains to Egyptian artifacts that Roger and I saw that were in a cave here in the state of Utah. And there's no question about it that they were Egyptian in nature based off of what we saw. So this stuff does exist. It is out there, and there is undeniably, I believe. Well, and again, sorry, you hit a hot button for me, Jeff. But I don't mean to monopolize the conversation, but let's take a look at that great Netflix series with what's his name, Graham Hancock.
Graham Hancock. Yeah.
I mean, he's run into that same exact thing where he has found absolute evidence, dating Göbekli Tepe, I think is the name of the dig that's over there in Turkey, and proving that it's older and was established civilization that predates anything that the, again, established academia is willing to accept. Right. So I think it's safe to say that human history is woefully incomplete, or at least it's not complete. We don't have an accurate picture of it. I mean, for all we know, these legends that we hear about, things like Atlantis and the lost continent of Mu, and all these great legends that are out there, are probably more than a little bit based in fact. And it kind of saddens me that a lot of archaeologists just are not willing to do their job as a scientist. Because let's face it, archaeology is a discipline of
They
science.
can't.
They
They can't. They
can't.
get
It's not-
ostracized, man. They can't go against status quo. Those that have gone against status quo, man, they end up being called kooks. They end up losing their jobs. They end up losing their profession, and so they can't. But I think it goes deeper than that. Just to think that the Phoenicians, who were a seafaring people, to think that, man, that even by accident they didn't get blown off course and shipped over to here, because it's a natural travel way.
Exactly.
That's crazy, but it goes farther than that. It's manifest destiny. It was kind of an unwritten law that you just couldn't come in and conquer a people. But because the Indians were stupid, they didn't have a language, they didn't have, they weren't civilized. It was to their betterment that we come in, conquer them, take over them, and better their lives. And so for that to be a real thing, they had to deny that all this ancient stuff was real.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
I wanted to just jump in real quick
Yeah,
with Jim's comment about all the different evidence. And this is something that Graham Hancock talks about. And I've been there. I don't know if you guys have seen Teotihuacan in Mexico. The Pyramid of the Sun there, they have the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, and then smaller pyramids there. But the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan, the base of Teotihuacan is exactly the same size as the base of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. And it's exactly half the height of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. You tell me, what are the astronomical odds of that being the case, where they would be the exact same size at the base and actually exactly half the height of the Great Pyramid in Giza? There had to be some Egyptian influence in the Americas.
Exactly. If you think about it, if any ancient civilization, let's go with the Egyptians or the Hebrews, any of those ancient civilizations, if they were to, get on a ship and the trade winds, the prevailing winds carried them, and let's say they landed either off the coast of Florida or the Yucatan Peninsula or anywhere down in Central or South America, and if they were to settle that land, not only would they find all the necessary natural resources and everything else that is down there, but they would also, when they settled that land, don't you think they would bring some of their traditions with them?
Oh, absolutely.
And so Egyptian culture would have been the prevailing civilization, I think, back within a certain time frame of when some of these civilizations might have possibly made their way to the Americas. I mean, it just makes sense to me. So like you were saying, Mark, there's got to be a connection to where those ancient seafaring cultures eventually made their way over to North, Central, South America and left record and trace of their time here. And I firmly believe that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Albert Atwell said near Tucson, Arizona. I don't know what he's talking about, but I do know about the Tucson lead crosses, Roman. It's not just Egyptian. There's been Roman artifacts found around here. Gypsy found a Roman coin, and the Tucson lead crosses. I don't know if that's what Albert's talking about or not. I did, because I didn't see the whole thing, but that's a fascinating story, and it got swept under the rug and covered up in a heartbeat by the Smithsonian. These artifacts that was found in Caliche, and they even had some of the archaeologists from one of the colleges help dig out some of these out of the Caliche, and then all of a sudden, when the Smithsonian got involved, it was all a fraud. But you research and check out the records of what happened to these artifacts and how they got covered up, and what, man, that's a crying shame of the history.
It is.
And them are some fascinating. Anybody don't know about the Tucson lead crosses, man, you need to check them out. Them are some fascinating artifacts that were found.
I'm writing it down because I have not heard.
Absolutely, and it's not like there isn't precedent for the mainstream, whether it be academia or government, wanting to cover up anything that goes against the mainstream, anything that goes against their narrative, if you will. I mean,
Yeah, and
we're
what's the
we're
big
seeing
deal?
that play
What is
out
the
right now in
matter?
Congress with the UAPs, right?
Yeah.
Where for how many years has the whole UFO thing been? Oh, that's all just hooey and nonsense. But now we're starting to have people from inside the government come forward and saying, "Well, no, I was actually a part of that program, and yeah, they really do exist, and
Yep.
here's the documentation to prove it." And so you can understand why those that are in control want to maintain control. That's the whole reason why they have powers to retain. They want to retain the power that they have, and the same is true in academia, in politics, religion, you name it. It's just
Archaeology.
it's
Archaeology.
archaeology.
Yep.
Perfect example. So
These
sorry, Terry. Go ahead.
Oh, these Tucson lead crosses, I went down to do some research on them and see them in person, you know, and I found out that they had an archive on some of the things that went on with that. And one of the guys that owned the property and was involved in, you know, and he, trying to fight that these were real, that he didn't fraud these, he didn't, and going through his stuff. And I got permission from the museum there to go through them. They told me though, if you write anything, if you publish anything, you have to publish that they're a fraud. You can't publish anything that states that they are real. They're you know. And I thought, what?
Yeah.
What? And the reason they went to this museum in the first place, he didn't want them to go to the college because the college turned against him and seen what the college did. Even though one of the college archaeologists was right there helping him dig it out of the caliche. You know, so he wanted him to go to a private museum that wasn't funded by the state, that they couldn't, and the state bought that museum, and now that's what they're saying.
See, it's amazing the lengths they'll go through for that, and that's one of the things. You know, if I can tout, you know, Oak Island for a moment, and this is one of the things that I think, you know, there's, and I've said this before on the show. There's two different camps with this kind of thing. There's those that just want treasure. That's all they care about, and then there's the folks that like. They want the history. They want the knowledge.
The history.
They want all that.
What really happened here?
Exactly.
Yep,
And that's
exactly.
me. I actually want both, but I want that history and what those guys are working on. And we all know, I mean, if you really think about it, all of us know that Christopher Columbus did not discover North America in that sense. There was many people here long before he was. Mm-hmm. And so if we can get to that truth, and I think these guys are working on it, that wasn't their intention, but it's leading that way now. There's so many researchers and whatnot that have finding, like Jimm said, all these different cultures that have been here, more than one. You know, you can say that there has been multiples here over the course of time. And why they didn't colonize and keep it, maybe they tried. I don't know. Who knows? That's a whole nother podcast right there. But
well, how do you explain the mound builders, right? The Hopewell civilization in Ohio. I mean, there's all these civilizations that are just right here in North America that we don't really have a clear picture of who they are, where they came from, and we have little glimpses into what their life might have been like, but we don't see an awful lot of investment on the part of archaeology and academia. And that's what bothers me is that, you know, there's no such thing as the phrase settled science. And think back to when Galileo was bringing out his theory of, you know, the earth is not, you know, the center. You know, the earth is not the center of the universe, and actually it's probably the earth going around the sun and not the other way around. And that was considered heresy. Okay, they put people to death for over things like that. And yet, are we not doing that same very thing in practice by not giving due diligence to some of these things that are being discovered and adequately documented by people like Graham Hancock with these ancient civilizations?
Yep.
And the answer is there's got to be some kind of, whether intentional or otherwise, it just seems to be the way that modern academia does business, and I think it shortchanges all of humanity in doing so.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Okay.
So I want to come back to that for just a minute, but Albert Atwell again. He's talking about Cyclone Covey's work, and when I was digging through my research, Cyclone Covey got permission from his university, Wakefield Forest, to go in and do a dig, a modern day dig where these artifacts were found for the Tucson lead crosses, see if there was any more. And and I don't know which university, if it was the University of Arizona or Arizona State, one of them put a stop to it. They contacted the head of Wakefield Forest and they put a stop to this dig on these. Cyclone Clevey had it all lined up. He was he was a scholar. He wanted to know the truth, and they put a stop to it. But back to we're beating up on the academia and the archaeologists and all that. We're beating up on them pretty good. But to their defense, there is a lot of fraud out there.
There is.
There is a lot of fraud out there.
No doubt.
And to go down a rabbit hole that's a fraud, because I've gone down some myself, and found out they were frauds, so I can see that when it comes to if it's against the mainstream academia, what they believe or what they've been taught, then they don't even want to look at it. They don't want to take a chance. Not to mention that if they do take it and believe in it and whatnot, just like the cocaine mummies, the tobacco Egyptian mummies, that lady that was doing the testing for them and found that, man, they tried to ostracize her and ruin her credibility and everything else. Well, that's what they do. But there are a lot of frauds out there that they have to watch out for. So get beat up on them too. I mean, we can beat up on them a little, but they do have their hands full with a lot of fraud.
Yeah, that's
well, Terry, that's a great point. But I think going back to what Jim was saying, when you look at somebody like Graham Hancock, who's not a scientist, he's not an archaeologist, he's a reporter. He's gathering information and he's gathering stories, and he's basically saying, this is the evidence. This is what we're seeing. And he has other people, geologists and other specialists coming in and verifying this information. And, there are a lot of them that have fought him on some of the information that he's presented. However, a lot more now are coming in and saying, yeah, he's right. What they're showing now, the evidence is there. You cannot deny the evidence. And
the hardliners are passing on, and the new generation is coming up, and it's slowly, now they're starting to admit, yeah, there was Vikings here. It's slowly starting to change.
Yeah. Finally, a little.
Of course, there's Vikings here. They were my ancestors, so I got to claim North America for my ancestors.
You do kind of resemble a Viking in a way. Yeah, I can see that.
Go Lions.
Exactly. Wow. I tell you what, this has been great, but I got to ask also, and again, going back to my list here a little bit, Terry, what's next? I mean, what's on your docket right now? What are you working on that, I know you're continuing with your research and you're talking to people and videos and all that, but what do you got working on right now?
I'm still working on the, and I have to do it as time permits. You got to take this as a hobby so that you don't ruin your life.
Yeah, true.
So you got to do it when you have time, when you got the funds. I'm self-funded. I'm doing this. I don't want to take anybody's money because I don't want to be owed to anybody.
Exactly. There you go.
And so I just got to do it. But the Josephine Mine is still finding that door. There may be nothing behind that door. I don't care. I just want to know who put that. There's rumors that the Romans were in the Uintas. Is this door? I can't imagine the Spaniards building this elaborate of the door. Who built this door? I want to know the history of this door, Yep. And then Brewer's Cave, that'll always be top on my list, but I've just come to a stalemate where I can't do anything without permission. Yep. And I'm not getting the permission, and then there's some projects that I won't talk about that I'm working on.
Understand. Yep, no
other than that, I don't know. I got a lot of things on my plate, and on what's the highest priority, it just depends on what happens on what day of the month and on whatnot, or what new information comes in, and there's always new information coming in, so you just, I don't know.
Just remember, Terry, I'm ready for an adventure.
Okay.
Me too. There's about a bunch of people out here in the chat that would love that. Somebody asked, does he need any help? Because a lot of people would love to be part of that and help you out with this. Oh my God.
I do not have any problems of people helping me, but I am cautious because I've been double crossed before. I've given out information and been double crossed before, and so I'm pretty cautious. So I have a few trusted friends in that, on some of these things that I'm really working on that I don't want being stolen from me, and I want to get it out to the public, and I don't want it messed up, and I don't, so I'm really cautious of that. There's other things that I'm working on that I could use help, and they just kind of fill in the gaps when I can't do the other stuff. There's always other stuff that I need help with, yeah.
Well,
so I got to tell you.
Go ahead.
I got to tell you. So I don't know if these guys know who Heavy D Sparks is, and if you don't, you need to check out his YouTube channel. He's not a treasure hunter, but he's just a great guy, and he puts out a lot of great content, and he helps out a lot of people with a lot of different things. Well, he offered to help me. He's got a Black Hawk helicopter. Oh. He offered to help me search for one of the things I was searching for: some Spanish cannons, this life-size carved bear in the middle of the Uintas. And he got his Black Hawk helicopter, and that had to cost him a fortune to do that and fly me around slow and scan hillsides and mountainsides. And sadly, man, I didn't come up with what I was looking for. But that was a great help, from him. And plus it was an exciting trip, man, to fly around the Uintas in a Black Hawk helicopter.
Heck yeah. Wow. So Heavy, is that like the word heavy?
Heavy D Sparks, Dave Sparks.
Okay. All right.
He was, they had him and his friends, they had the show on TV, the Diesel Brothers, but he's got his YouTube channel now. Okay. So Heavy D Sparks, man, he's got a lot of great, he helps people out and they get stuck. Or man, I watched, there was an old gentleman, when the lake down by Vegas, what's that lake called?
Lake Mead.
Lake Mead. There was older gentleman, man, that had a houseboat. His houseboat broke down. He couldn't move it, and the lake dried up and left him stranded. Well, he went down there with all his equipment, man, and pulled his houseboat to the water and got him going. And he does a lot of stuff like that. He's just a great guy.
Wow, that's great.
Next time you get that Black Hawk helicopter, you need to go over Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, you do.
That's man, I already got in trouble for that. Brandon's a friend of mine, and Brandon knew what I was doing, and that's a story that I don't want to tell right now. But I got in trouble from some of the other Skinwalker folks because they didn't know what I was doing. And anyway, that's a story that I don't want to tell, but it was interesting.
You need to save that for the next time you come on.
Yes, exactly. Yes, we got to have you back on for sure, because I tell you what, you have been fascinating.
We've got to get Roger healthy as well, Terry. So
yeah.
you, me, and Roger, and maybe take some GPR up into that one place that we know about up there in the Uintas.
We definitely got to check that out this spring.
Absolutely.
I'm going to reach out to the chat while and Mark and Jim, if you have any other questions you can bring up. I'm going to reach out to the chat and ask, is there anyone out there that has any questions that you would like to ask of Terry Carter for this part of the show? I tell you what, it's been absolutely wonderful. I just knew that I'd be on the edge of my seat, seriously. And I'm not kidding about that, Terry. I mean, on the edge of my seat, listening to some of the stuff. I mean, watching your videos on your YouTube channel, and the people, like you said, and it's so cool. And I've got some cassette tapes, believe it or not. I don't even have a cassette player anymore, but I have cassette tapes of people who have given stories of their past that are now past for many years, that before it was recorded before they passed. And man, it's you try to preserve these, but magnetic tapes, how long are they going to last? And you got to get that media over onto something else. But
I have a ton of those cassette tapes. Anybody that I talked to back in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, before I started video recording them, man, they all went on a cassette tape. I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of recordings on cassette tapes.
Yeah. And do you have a cassette tape player? You know,
I do.
that's all got to get transferred. So it goes
Yep.
onto a media that can be saved forever.
Yep.
Hey, Jeff, I just want to give a pitch for Terry's event called The Gathering.
Oh, okay.
I really wanted to go to it several years, and this was the first time I was able to go. And like he said, I brought some people with me. We had an absolutely fantastic time. I mean, we're all ready to come back. We loved it. You know, we heard some amazing stories. So for anybody that's on your podcast that's listening, next year in 2025, it's going to probably be in August, Terry, August, September time.
Probably. We got to have a meeting and figure out, you know, even if we're going to do it, you know, every year I think it's a lot of work and I don't know if this is even work because we make zero money on this, you know, whatever money we make goes to pay for it. And if there's any left over, it goes to help pay for the next year. You know, we make zero money. You know, we pay for our own food. We come out there just like everybody else, you know. But what made it worth it for me this year, Mark, man, is I had a lady come up to me, and I'd say in my videos, you know, this is the greatest place to network with people for treasure hunting, Bigfoot, UFO. This is a great place to network with these people. And I said on one of my videos, I says, if you see a small group of people talking, if you're shy to talk to people, just go stand up and listen. Well, I had this lady come up and talk to me, and she says, Terry, she says, I had the most wonderful time, and I did exactly what you told me to do, and I'll never miss another one of these. And I says, what did I tell you to do? She says, she says, if you see people standing around talking, just go eavesdrop and listen. And she says, I did, and I heard the most fantastic stories. I'd have never, ever heard of. She says, I'll never, ever miss another one of these.
And that's
that
why
made it worth it for me right there. Right there made it worth it for me right there.
I can't get away with that because especially when I'm wearing my Stetson, people are too intimidated by me. They're like, that guy's he's too big and scary. I'm not going to go talk to that guy. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the whole thing. I just want to make sure people on the podcast know that when it comes up next year, they ought to plan to make the trip to Utah. And, you know, the way we did it was we kind of combined some other things like going metal detecting. And I know they took some people out and let them camp on the ranch next to Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that you can do while you're there. So I'm just making a pitch to the people that are on the podcast that are listening. If you hear about it and you see the dates and you're on Terry's YouTube or following him, absolutely, if you get an opportunity, go, because you'll meet a lot of interesting people and hear some phenomenal stories.
Is that the Moon Lake Gathering?
The Moon Lake Gathering.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks for that plug, Mark. Hey, Zig Zane said he's a new fan. Thank you, Zig Zane.
Yeah, he's been helping me out with some. He does a lot of. He's graphs. What do we call
cool.
I'm at a loss for words at the moment. We when we're doing Curse of Oak Island stuff, and we're looking at the island from the satellite views or whatever, and he takes and does these overlays and the CAD program and putting all these lines and Mark and just I don't know what you'll call all that stuff, but he's really, really good at it. So he's been helping out a lot, and
cool.
I really appreciate Zane a lot and the work he does for everybody. So yeah. AutoCAD maps and overlays. Yeah, there you go. And he's an expert with this stuff. And he's also a Lions fan. So there you go. So got to throw that in there.
Well, now that my Raiders season is completely down the tubes, I'm cheering for two teams. I'm cheering for the Lions for the NFC, and I'm cheering for the Bills in the AFC because I'm upstate New York. So got to do that.
Wouldn't that be something if they ended up in the Super Bowl together? I don't know.
That would be a dilemma. Is what that would be.
That would be a big dilemma. Like I live in Pittsburgh area now. Of course, living here, you kind of have to follow the local team a little bit.
Yeah.
Never really was a Steeler fan, but so whenever the Steelers are on and then they're playing either the Lions or somebody or whatever, I just have to sit quiet and not say a word throughout the entire game. So I was just looking to see, and I was scrolling back here to see if we had any questions. I know there was a couple that were on early on. Somebody had asked the question. You actually already answered it. My wife is what?
A Steelers fan.
Oh yes, a Steelers fan. Yeah, that's why I have to be quiet. That's what I was talking about earlier. Yeah. But somebody had mentioned, and you answered it before, like if you found some treasure, and there was two different portions or two different ways of asking this question. One was if you did find treasure, would you sit on it or would you tell somebody? And I think you already answered that, saying you would because you want it preserved, so you would tell somebody and get it out there, right? I mean, yep. And then the other one was, would you hold back? And if it was going to lead to something else, would you hold back on disclosing it until you were able to exhaust the other lead you had? And in that case, I think I might. If I found something, but yet it had a lead going to somewhere else.
So I will give you an example of that.
All right.
So Brewer's Cave.
Mm-hmm.
Brewer kept everything in this cave of his because when he took it home, when he had his arrowheads and things like that, his wife would sell them. It made him mad. So everything that he thought was important and he didn't want his wife to know about, he kept in this cave. And he went there every night excavating. And
wow.
he had a map and he had a journal that he kept and he left it in this cave. Everything in that tomb, man, the mummies, the ancient records, everything, man, I would video it first and get the archaeologists in there and turn it to whoever. But his journal and that map he deciphered, man, I'd keep for a while to see where it led me. I'd eventually turn it over, but that I would keep for a while. So you're exactly right. There's some things I wouldn't divulge until I've exhausted what it led to.
Exactly. Yeah, you'd have to. I think so. Wow. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I always love hearing Terry, hearing his stories. You know, I want to go on an adventure with Terry sometime. Just all he has to do is tell me when.
You know, you don't know how many. 99.9% of my adventures are worthless. They're just hiking. They're just, you don't see anything. You don't find anything.
But Terry, that time is never wasted.
I just want to hang out with you.
Oh, okay.
Remember what you were saying a moment ago, well, a little while ago about people being the treasure? You are one of the treasures. That's what Mark is talking about.
The people are the treasures. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would love to. I don't know if I'm not really a drinking man, but I would love to just sit down and have dinner with you or something like that, and just kick back like we kind of did tonight. Just kick back and listen to. You talked about you call yourself a treasure hunter, but yet you're a researcher and you've been bringing all this information in from all of these people. Your head has to be so full of all this stuff. But you know what? You have now, because of doing this, you have become this resource of all this information. Not only is it on your YouTube channel, which I strongly encourage, people have already said they've already gone out there and subscribed to it, but you are now this massive information that, you got to make sure everything, sure everything is in your head is put in, preserved.
The problem is this head isn't very, it doesn't hold much, something goes in and something else goes out. But that's why I had to start recording everything, and even if I did retain it, there's no way I could retell the story that they told me. There's no way.
Yeah.
Terry, did you know Jimm Periel?
Yes, I knew Jimm.
What happened to all of his records and documents and everything that he collected?
I'm not sure, but he was a treasure trove of stuff that he collected. I mean, he was one of the old-time treasure hunters, knew all the old-time treasure hunters, and gathered up all that information as they passed away. He had a lot, and I know that why can't I think of his name? Wait till you get my age. You won't be able to remember either. One of his partners that can't believe I can't remember his name. One of his partners, he was going to try and get a hold of get that stuff.
Jimm's
their Watts. They had a club called Watts Worldwide.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, a lot of these old timers have just gathered amazing amounts of information and treasure and locations. they pass away, and
And
who
it gets
knows what
thrown
happens
away.
to all this material.
You know, it's I got lucky enough that Dr. Oren Swearingen. I don't know if you guys know about Victoria Peak and
Mexico, New
Doc
Mexico.
Noss and all that. Well, he was a major player in that. He funded a lot of money, and he started looking for Doc Noss's gold on that clear back in the 50s. When he passed away, I ended up with all his stuff, all his tapes, his videos. I had a lot of great, man, I probably took 1 million views off my YouTube channel down of things that I had on that, because Terry Delanis with the Over the Noss Family Partnership for Victoria Peak and that treasure story there. It was going on TV. I think it was called Lies, Videotapes,
Lies, and something.
Yeah, something like that. Well, I took down 1 million views,
Wow.
1 million views worth of videos down for that show, because they asked me to. Terry Delanis asked me to, and says, you know, there's a chance we could get on to the White Sands Missile Range, and if we can, you know, I'll invite you out. So I did it for him. But that information that Dr. Oren Swearingen collected and I ended up with was priceless to me. Somebody else, it was just junk to his family, but to me it was priceless, because it was a history of what went on, what happened, you know.
Yep,
That's great.
Fran is asking, Terry, do you have a full interview with Terry?
I do have that full interview, and that's one of the interviews I took down for Terry Delanis. Yes, I do, and that's an amazing story with Tony Jolly. Yep.
Can this ever come back on? Can you ever put it back up?
Well, I don't know. I agreed to take it down for him, but it's one heck of an amazing story, and it's Tony Jolly himself telling the story when he went. Doc Noss felt he was getting double crossed, and so he was he needed help moving 110 gold bars that he'd gotten out of Victoria Peak, and so he happened to see a guy that he'd worked in the oil field before, and he asked him, "Hey, can you give me some help?" So Tony Jolly helped him. Tony Jolly didn't 100% know where he was at, because he wasn't in the area, but he helped to move 110 gold bars, and then he got scared for his life, and so. Man, it's a great story. But after Doc Noss, that very next morning, Doc Noss got killed, murdered. And years later, Tony went back and tried to find that, and he found some of that gold. He didn't find it all. He found some of it. And he worked a deal out with one of these gold mine operators. They crushed it up, milled it in with the regular gold, and he disposed of it that way. But there was still some out there. So Dr. Oren Swearingen and them guys went out there, and they tried to track down and find that area. But they finally found the area where they figured it was out, and they went and they found 3 empty holes. Somebody else had already found it and dug it up and got them.
Oh, man.
Wow. That's incredible. See what I mean? There's so many stories that
there's so many stories out there,
man.
and I got a lot of stories. I just got to be reminded of them.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Terry Carter, sir, this has been fantastic. I knew it would be. Folks watching in the chat, every one of them has been commenting about how this has been so interesting, and to listen to what you have had to say. Sir, I'm going to have you back on the show at some point. I'll give you some time to kind of get back to your own work, but we got to have you back for sure at some point. And anytime that you are going to be at giving a presentation somewhere, as you did at Phenomicon in Vernal, Utah, please let us know so we can let folks know, because that is truly, when you come to a place to give your presentation, you had that room that we were all sitting in there enthralled for the whole time, an hour or whatever it was, hour and 15 minutes or whatever you had. It was so good to listen to and look at your slides.
That's good to hear, because I was terrified.
It was good. It was really good. And I was sitting there with my phone, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but I was taking a few pictures. I was thinking about that as we were beginning the show tonight. I thought, oh, I have a few pictures of some of his slides that he put up on there, but oh my gosh, it was so good. And I really, really, truly appreciate you coming on the show with us, sir. This has been wild and just fantastic to hear these stories and all of that. Continue your research. Continue your stories. We'll keep following you on the YouTube channel. And again, folks, it may have joined us late. I do have his YouTube channel and his Facebook page linked in the description below. Please go check that out. You are going to get a ton of information. And I will say again, if you like the content we did for you here today, please give us a thumbs up. It'll help out a lot to get this video out there. And share it with your friends and family if you enjoyed it. So I do want to say also that next week we have again our Curse of Oak Island show. Is going to be on Wednesday night at 7:30, and then on the 21st on Thursday night, 1 week from today, we have his name is Dustin Eskelson, and he is the director of MUFON for Utah. And Jimm Kjelgaard is going to join me as my co-host for that. So you want to check that out if you're into the whole UFO thing and all of that, which I know Terry is too. You have that one video on there showing it's a dinosaur eating a UFO or something on the.
So I run into the UFO stuffs all the time, but I try to stay away from that because this treasure, man. I got to just deal with people that are dead. I don't want to die. I don't want to deal with aliens that are going to attack me and kidnap me and probe me. But it goes hand in hand because you run out in the mountains, you run into people that know about this stuff. It goes kind of hand in hand. But yeah.
And Bigfoot and all that too.
Same with Bigfoot. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff, Terry's just going to have tacos with us next time you're in Utah. We're going to have to.
Hey, I love tacos.
Yeah, me too. That's
right.
All right, Jeff, pick me up. Let's go.
All right. Yep. We'll head over there. I'm telling you, I'm going. Well, I'll be back in Utah. There's no doubt about it. Christina loves the place as well. We were out there twice, and we just love it out there. And it's
Utah and the Uinta Mountains are a great place. And there's a lot of stories of a lot of different things. Treasure, Bigfoot, UFO in the Uinta Mountains. There's just a lot of stuff.
Yes, there is. There absolutely is. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. Marc Hoover, Jimm Kjelgaard, thank you guys so very much for joining us here tonight. Really appreciate it. And again, Terry Carter, thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
It's an honor to have you on the show. Absolutely is. And I just love all your information. And again, folks, check out his stuff there. It's really good. Thank you, folks, for being here with us tonight. And don't forget, next week are the other shows we have. And until then, we'll catch you next time right here on the J Free 906 podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.